The following is an 18PR production. From deep in the heart of West Texas.
And everybody knows Studio A or Ground Zero is at 18PR, and everyone knows 18PR is out yonder.
It's a one-of-a-kind, worldwide transmission. Heroes and Heroines File. The Free-Range Talent File. The Unexplained Files. The Ain't Love Grand File. Michael Shawn's Campfire.
And the Free-Range Texan News Network.
A clear and present detour on the road of everyday life.
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast.
With our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn.
Free Range Texan, episode 23. What a show we got lined up for you here. You had to know that was coming. But it's true. Before we get started with the business of our podcast here, let me just point something out. It is becoming more and more evident that the single most important thing on our focus list is you, the listeners of our podcast, whether you're here in Texas, around the United States, or around the world. We love you and appreciate you, and we do this show for you. I want to thank all the folks that have given us great response, and we see where a lot of that is coming from around the world, and it just it's kind of amazing. We are humbled. That's why we do the things like the whole snapshot deal, because we really do care who you are. One of the really fun things about our podcast is this Send In Your Snapshot program, where people from all around the country and all over the world send us a snapshot, and all you have to put there is your name and where you're from. We take those snapshots and we put them up on the blog, and we put them on our Free Range Texan Facebook page, and some days we have to ship them into next week because we just can't get to all of them. Anyway, we appreciate all of you. Now, back to today's program. There is a guy that you may not have heard of yet, but you're about to hear a lot about him. And Jordan Robert Kirk is legitimately one of the better singers that we've had on board here on the podcast. And our Free Range Talent File today is going to feature Jordan Robert Kirk. And we're glad to do it. But before we get to that, believe it or not, did you know the guy that invented the whole chicken cannon thing was, of course, a Texan? I see some of the looks on some of your faces there. What is a chicken cannon? Well, we're gonna do the complete story about the development of a chicken cannon. That's going to be coming up. I'm telling you, the depth of the information on this podcast is mind-boggling, isn't it? So let's get ready to ride. Well, now I'd like to just take a moment here and tell y'all the story about the world-famous chicken cannon. Now, there are some strange and wonderful characters in East Texas. That's a geographic region best described as a land that time and darn near everything else forgot. East Texas sports some of the most beautiful country that you will ever feast your eyes upon. You can easily traverse a swamp while driving through a pine forest at the same time. It's unique. A beautiful place to be, and some real original characters. The good folk of East Texas can be a self-reliant lot. As one census taker found out some years ago, seemed that there was some doubt as to the accuracy of the count in one East Texas county. Don't ask me which one. I think some things are better left to be imagined. At any rate, he came upon this lady doing her laundry in a cast iron kettle, water bubbling hot over a well-stoked wood fire. It was downright picturesque, and could have easily been a scene from the late 1800s, as opposed to sometime in the mid-1970s. He identified himself to the woman and waited, and waited, and waited. Figuring her to be a little hard of hearing, he announced his name and his position a bit louder, and told her that he was there trying to find out how many people lived in that particular East Texas county. Well, the woman stopped her work for a moment. She eyed him with a level of suspicion. She spat some tobacco juice on the fire underneath her kettle and said, "Well, shucks darn, mister. Why are you asking me? I ain't counted them." As it turns out, her name was Maybelle Julene Dervish, mother of a longtime East Texas high school football star, Purvis Dervish. Purvis always figured his moves at blocking back. He'd sort of whirl around, flail his arms, and make a sound like a tornado drawing a bead on a trailer park, snort and kick a dirt-clod field goal behind the referee's back. Oncoming defensive linemen would just melt in their tracks like bad butter. Purvis's daddy was an owner of a portable tilt-a-whirl ride, spent most of his time on the road. Purvis was born while his mama was helping Daddy Dervish test the ride after a particularly hard road trip. That and the fact that Purvis stayed in high school until he was 27 years old probably accounted for the fact that they moved around a lot. After Purvis finally graduated from high school, he took a job with the FAA. Seems he had the patent on an invention they desperately wanted for their testing program to build jet airliners with windshields. Windshields that would be impervious to this or that odd bird. Purvis had invented a cannon that shot dead chickens. Nobody ever figured out why he invented it. He just did. And the FAA wanted it. And Purvis figured they'd wanted his chicken gun, and that's why they'd take him too. That chicken gun helped the FAA solve one of the modern mysteries of flight: how to build and install windshields that would bounce a bird off into birdie heaven without entering the cockpit and wreaking serious havoc. Then, the French and the English got wind of Purvis and his invention and got him to send his invention over to them to help with the high-speed trains in their area. Seems they were having the same problem, low-flying fowl. Purvis had no notion to travel overseas, you see, so he just sent the chicken gun with explicit instructions on its use. To his utter amazement, the French and the English wanted their money back because they said the gun didn't work. Well, Purvis looked over the procedures and wired back and told them they should try the tests one more time. And this time, Purvis wrote, use a thawed chicken. You see, Purvis was smarter than he looked. I'm Michael Shawn. We'll be right back. Have digital microphone will travel. This show not made in New York City, not made in Hollywood. I'm thinking we should turn this one up, y'all. You're listening to the Free Range Texan Podcast. It's time now for another segment of Free Range Talent, brought to you by A-Team-PR, bringing a host of creative media production and public relations services to our exclusive list of clients. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. And now, here's the next segment of Free Range Talent. The Free Range Texan Talent File is just so pleased to have Jordan Robert Kirk on our program, and a good, bright and early West Texas morning to Jordan Robert Kirk. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, I'll tell you, brother, we're blessed better than we deserve around here. We just became really aware of you recently, the last few days, if you'll forgive us for being behind the curve a little bit. We got to thank Kid Manning before we go any further, because Kid's not one of those guys that throws around a lot of compliments. And I've known Kid for about 100 years. Told me, he said, Jordan Robert Kirk is a guy to watch, and told us, hands down, we should have you on the Free Range Talent File. So here you are, sir.
Man, Kid Manning's my man.
He is. And this interview is being recorded at 8 o'clock in the morning, which would not work for most professional musician types, but you are also a farmer, and so getting up at dawn is not a strange thing for you.
Yes, sir. I think I would be the fifth generation. My great-great-great-grandpa was the founder of Crosby County. He was the first settler in Crosby County. His name was Hank Smith. So it goes back pretty far. But I don't think that'll be me. That's my goal anyway, to stay hungry and humble and keep my boots in the dirt and my head in the clouds writing songs, but definitely going to keep my boots in the dirt and remember all my friends and family and people who were there for me.
I was reading on your website a little bit about the fact that for a while you gave up singing and songwriting, and you were going to Texas Tech. How come you walked away for a while, a tremendous talent like you are?
I love singing, I love writing, and there's so many things that I love about music, but getting ready to go to school, I don't know what I want to do, and I said, well, I'm good at math, so I guess I'll try mechanical engineering, and that was pretty much the only reason why I did it, but for about 4 years, I didn't do a whole lot of anything but study. I think I wrote one song in 4 years, ended up having a decent GPA, getting a decent job, and when I got that job and got out of tech and realized that, man, it's cool, I got a good degree and got a good job, but there's no way I could do this for the rest of my life. And that was when I started writing a lot, singing a lot, and playing more and more gigs. And I just realized this is what I want, and I'm gonna go for it. You've recently released a song called "The Pine Box."
It's definitely a down-home toe tapper, but it also reveals that you had a close relationship with your dad.
Yes, sir. So actually, me and my dad's still alive. We have a real close relationship. I ended up actually using a buddy of mine who's been a mentor and a friend in the video. His name is Bill Davis. He was a little more willing to be in the video on screen and everything. But the song is about my dad, who I farm with now, and about just about family and the will. And trying to pay for everything, and worrying about money, and not everybody is so lucky and blessed and fortunate to have all the money they need. So I said, that's when I sat down and I was like, I'm going to write my own will and make my own eulogy, put it in a song, and bury me in a pine box. I don't want to spend a dime. I want everybody to enjoy it and remember the good things about my life.
You've also got some other great music up on your website. There are people all around the world that listen to this podcast, and one of the reasons why is because of that Texan name that is in this podcast. And one of the things that we like to do is present music that is authentically West Texan. Now, a lot of people, when you say that, immediately think of all of the old stuff, the Bob Wills and all that sort of thing. And that's great. And that's our roots. Few people really realize, and what we enjoy doing on this podcast is sharing that there are brand new, born and raised West Texans who are continuing the legacy of really great music. And you, Jordan Robert Kirk, are one of the best examples of that.
Well, thank you so much. And that's actually one of the things I pride myself in. And, outside of the state or even outside of the country as a family or, different things. A lot of people say I'm from Texas, and I'll say, well, I'm from Lubbock, or I'm from Idalou, or, I'm from West Texas.
Well, Jordan Robert Kirk, we want to remind folks of a couple of things, and that is, first of all, if they will go to our blog, which is at freerangetexan.net, and go to the blog, that we're in the process of putting up an article about you, and that there are a number of pictures there if people like to see what you look like. Also, there is a way for you to listen to your music there on the blog. Your music is also available for download in our Free Range Texan House of Treasures, which is also at freerangetexan.net. And you folks can go in there and get some of Jordan Robert Kirk's music and spread it around the house there, because it is definitely real live West Texan music. And if you were going to watch someone, remember this day on the Free Range Texan podcast when we had Jordan Robert Kirk on the show, and he was not just in between gigs, but in between going out and climbing back up on the tractor later today. And this is the real deal, the real guy, and we predict, should you choose to continue, you will be a name in the music industry. So
I really appreciate the kind words, and we'll see. I'm gonna put my nose to the grindstone and keep working at it.
So here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the latest release from Jordan Robert Kirk, Pine Box, on the Free Range Texan podcast.
Bury me in a pine box, don't dwell long on my death. Remember all the things I've done, I always did my best. Don't spend money on a coffin or a real fancy gravestone. Just bury my body in a pine box and leave it alone. Maybe by that time I'll have had all I can stand, Pine would come cheap, heroes all over Louisiana. There ain't no life and death. If there was death and life, follow my example. Living don't waste any time. Living don't waste any time. So bury me in a pine box. Don't dwell long on my death. Remember all the things I've done. I always did my best. Don't spend money on a coffin, a real fancy gravestone. Just bury my body in a pine box and leave it alone. Love to the family if there's any of them left. If they get to boasting, tell them I live and dead. Cause if I die before my time, cause I had a little too much fun, Lord, come with me, I still got the race to run. I still got the race to run. So So bury me in a pine box, don't dwell on my death. Remember all the things I've done, I always did my best. Don't spend money on a coffin or a real fancy gravestone. Just bury my body in a pine box and leave it alone. Just like my dad always did. You can serve his memory right, but no one does it like he did. You can't do it like he did. To live is Christ, but to die is gain. Take my soul up yonder where I won't feel any pain. No more pain. So bury me in a pine box, well on my death. Remember all the things I've done, I always did my best. Don't spend money on a coffin, a real fancy gravestone. Just bury my body in a pine box and leave it alone. Just bury my body in a pine box and leave it alone.
You've been listening to the Free Range Talent File. If you'd like more information about our guests, just go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Also, submissions to be interviewed on our program can also be submitted on freerangetexan.net. Well, once upon a time, way back in 2018, A-Team PR decided to build the first free-range Texan podcast.
Right, well, bring the show band in and put them right back over there. It's a mariachi band. Okay, well, fine. What do you mean Selig didn't return our call? A campfire at the beginning of the program? No. Move the campfire to the end of the show.
Well, now just look at what's happened. The Heroes and Heroines File. The Unexplained Files. The Free Range Talent File. The Travelin' Texas File. The Ain't Love Grand File. Our Free Range Texan website. The Free Range Texan House of Treasures. The Free Range Texan blog. The Free Range Texan listener posse. The Free Range Texan YouTube channel. Free Range Texan Facebook page. And now, the Free Range Texan News Network. And the place to find it all is at freerangetexan.net.
So saddle up, my friends. We're riding in the place where it all started. The Free Range Texan Podcast.
Hit 'em up, move 'em out. Hi, this is Michael Shawn, and welcome back to our campfire. Pour you a cup of cowboy coffee there and take a seat. There are a lot of strange tales from the old Wild West. The stuff of legends, gunslingers robbing banks and trains, and cowboys on long cattle drives, gold and silver rushes. On the Free Range Texan, we've talked about dinosaurs, UFOs, camels, giant cannibals, but that's not what most people think about when they think about the Old West. Every time period has had its strange stories, and the Wild West is no different. Some of those stories are exactly what you'd expect, while others are surprisingly modern. Elmer McCurdy's afterlife was stranger than his life as an outlaw. Elmer McCurdy is not exactly a household name. Unlike Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Jesse and Frank James, and Billy the Kid, his exploits as a train and bank robber never gained him much infamy. Neither did his status as one of the last real Wild West outlaws killed in a shootout with the law. He said he'd never be taken alive. Turns out that was true. Elmer McCurdy gained his fame more than 60 years after his death in 1976, when memories of those Wild West days on the frontier were dying with the last people who'd lived them. That's when the crew of the television show, The $6 Million Man, borrowed an amusement park funhouse to shoot an episode. As one of the crew members moved a dummy, its arm fell off, revealing that the dummy was actually a mummy. That's right, I said the dummy was a mummy. McCurdy, specifically, as an autopsy later revealed. It seems that after being shot, someone had gone to the funeral home and identified themselves as McCurdy's long-lost brother-in-law in order to take the body. In fact, he was a carnival owner. Carnivals did a brisk trade in outlaw corpses to attract crowds in the early days of the 20th century. McCurdy's body also spent time as repayment for a bad debt, playing a mummy in a freak show, collecting dust in a wax museum storage space before he became a funhouse prop. McCurdy was finally laid to rest on Boot Hill in Guthrie, Oklahoma, 66 years after he was killed. Were it not for a clumsy prop crew member, who knows where he would be today. That's the type of stuff I guess you hear around the campfire. Thanks for joining us, my friends. Adios. Well, we're getting ready to pull up stakes on episode 23 of the Free Range Texan podcast. As always, great to have you on board. Want to thank you. A special thanks to Jordan Robert Kirk from Idalou, Texas. One of the next great talents to come down the line and our guest today on the Free Range Texan podcast. And I know after today's show, a lot of you are thinking, where can I get a chicken cannon? Oh, I tell you what, doing this show is one of the funnest things I've done. I mean, I am thankful for you folks that listen to our podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. And whether or not you're submitting something to our free range talent file or just a little talk back on the show, or you've got some ideas and some thoughts you want to share with us, it's all at one place. That's that freerangetexan.net, and it's actually simpler than that. info@freerangetexan.net is the address where you can email us directly or send in your snapshots or whatever you want to do there. info@freerangetexan.net. You get a chance to drop in our Facebook page, the Free Range Texan Facebook page. Give us a thumbs up over there. We appreciate that. And as always, we'll round them up, saddle up, and ride a couple of weeks from now. We are a bi-weekly podcast. For those of you who might be thinking about producing a podcast of your own, it's doable. Call your friends at A-Team PR. They can make things happen. That's their job. I recommend them. They produce this podcast. ateampr.com, or go to freerangetexan.net and click on the button there that'll take you directly to the A-Team PR website. Customized production of all types, advertising, public relations. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. That's it for now. Take them home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael Shawn and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now. You hear?
This is Free Range Texan Airways, Podcast 1, ready for takeoff.
Podcast 1, you're cleared for takeoff.
Nose up. Check wheels up.
Wheels up.
Reduce flaps. Mr. Sanders, take us to 10,000 feet. Bring us around to a course of south by southwest.
10,000 feet, south by southwest. Aye, Captain.
Engage autopilot.